"Get off our property!" the woman snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Her name was Marjorie Sinclair, president of the Brookvale Homeowners Association, and judging by the look in her eyes, she was used to people doing what she said. Behind her stood 2 board members and a uniformed officer, the third one I'd seen that day. I'd only owned this land for 2 weeks, 2 quiet acres, 1 aging lake, all legally mine. But to them it was their playground, their right, their control. You're watching Tomato Tales, where real stories twist deeper than fiction. If you love mysteries built on truth, hit that subscribe button now, because this one starts with an HOA and ends with federal law. The cop stepped forward, one hand resting on his belt. I lifted my laptop, opened a bookmarked page, and turned the screen toward him. "Before you make a report," I said evenly, "take a look at this." The HOA members leaned in. Their faces went pale. They'd called the cops on me for trespassing on my own property, but this time, they were about to learn who really had the law on their side. Ever dealt with people who think they own you? By the 3rd officer that afternoon, I already knew the rhythm, the calm arrival, the doubtful tone, and the quiet realization once they saw my documents. "Sir," the officer began, "you'll need to stop what you're doing here. The HOA says you're building without permission." I turned the laptop toward him again. "This is Title 33, Section 329(4) of the Code of Federal Regulations," I said. "It defines federal waterways. This lake connects to one through a culvert built in 1947. That means federal jurisdiction, not theirs." He leaned closer. "Federal?" I nodded. "Army Corps of Engineers. The HOA has no authority here." The color drained from Marjorie's face. Her 2 companions shifted uneasily. They had no idea what I'd uncovered the night before. A 1947 hydraulic survey proving the lake's hidden link to a navigable river. I'd spent my career uncovering buried truths. This time the truth was 6 feet under mud. But to understand how this fight began, how it spiraled from polite arguments to police reports, I need to take you back 6 hours earlier. Back to the morning I first met Marjorie Sinclair. That morning, the fog was just lifting off the lake when 3 strangers appeared on my land, and the woman in front was already ready for a war she didn't know she'd lose. Subscribe to Tomato Tales so you don't miss how the HOA's false. Authority meets real federal law, and I start collecting proof that changes everything. The fog was lifting off the water that morning when 3 figures emerged from the neighboring subdivision, their silhouettes sharp against the pale light. The woman in front, Marjorie Sinclair, the same voice that would be shouting at me hours later, walked with practiced confidence. 2 men trailed behind her, one clutching a binder so thick it looked like a rule book for life itself, the other just there to nod along. "Excuse me," she called out, stepping into my line of sight before I could even finish setting up my survey tripod. "I'm the president of the Brookvale Homeowners Association. That lake behind you? It's community property." I turned slowly. The morning air was cool, the kind that carries sound clearly enough for truth to cut through it. "Community property?" I repeated, keeping my tone level. "You sure about that?" She gestured toward the man with the binder. "Clay, give him the regulations." The guy flipped open the folder and started listing rule numbers. 47 of them, according to Marjorie, all meant to control everything from boat size to algae color. The 3rd board member, an older man named Paul, hung back a step. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I appreciate you coming by," I said, "but I've reviewed the deed and the county plats myself. The lake is fully within my parcel. No covenants, no easements, no shared rights." Marjorie's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We've managed this lake for 20 years. Everyone in the neighborhood knows it belongs to the community. If your deed says otherwise, it must be wrong." I took out my phone, pulled up the scanned copy of my recorded deed, and held it up so she could see the official county stamp. "This is straight from the courthouse," I said. "You can call the clerk if you want, but I suggest you do it from your side of the property line." Clay's voice turned sharp. "Do you even know what you're reading? What's your background in this?" I met his stare. 11 years as a land surveyor and title examiner. I've seen more forged plats and fake claims than you can imagine. "This isn't one of them." Marjorie cut him off, raising her voice just enough for the threat to be clear. "If you continue to trespass on community property, we'll have no choice but to involve the authorities." I snapped 3 photos. The private property sign I'd installed that morning, GPS tagged and time-stamped. The deed with my name and the county seal. The 3 of them standing on my land making threats. "I'm documenting this conversation," I said calmly. "You're welcome to review your own bylaws. You'll find no mention of this lake because it's never been part of your association." Paul shifted uneasily. "Marjorie, maybe we should—" She cut him off. "We'll be in touch." They turned back toward the subdivision. I watched them disappear down the trail, binder and all, before checking my watch. 10:17 a.m. By 11:30 my phone rang. The first police call of the day. When the officer arrived, his tone was calm, but the flashing lights across the lake told me this was only the beginning. By 11:30 a.m., the peace I'd come here to find was shattered by the sound of gravel crunching under police boots. A patrol car rolled up to the edge of my driveway, red and blue lights flickering across the lake's dark surface. "Morning, sir," the officer said, adjusting his hat. "We got a call about someone trespassing on community property." I almost smiled. Community property. There it was again. "No problem, officer," I replied. "I've got everything you'll need to clear this up." He followed me down toward the lake, his radio murmuring faintly. Sunlight rippled across the water as I laid out the documents on the tailgate of my truck. The deed, the plat map, the title insurance, every record stamped and sealed. He took his time, walking the perimeter with me. When he came back, his tone had changed from firm to neutral. "Sir, it looks like you're the legal owner here." "I'll note that in my report. I'd suggest trying to work this out peacefully with the HOA." I nodded. "I've been trying, but peace wasn't what Marjorie wanted." By 1:45 p.m., another squad car rolled up. Different officer, same complaint. By 4:30, a third. 3 police visits in 6 hours, all because the HOA couldn't accept that their power stopped at my fence line. Each time, I added new entries to my growing file, timestamps, badge numbers, audio clips, dispatch logs if I could get them. Every photo was GPS tagged, every document saved twice. To them, it was harassment. To me, it was evidence. That evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, I sat on the tailgate of my truck and watched the lake turn to glass. The surface reflected the orange sky perfectly, the kind of view I'd always wanted. This land wasn't just property to me. It was my mother's voice in my head, reminding me that land is the only thing no one can take from you, if you know how to hold it. She'd been gone 6 months. Her savings had given me the means to buy this place. I'd told myself this land would bring quiet, but the lesson came back fast. Peace has to be defended just like truth. In my 11 years as a title examiner, I'd seen enough false claims to know what came next. When people lose control, they rewrite the rules. What they didn't know was that I already had something bigger than their bylaws on my side. Federal law. Rehook. That night, I opened a forgotten file buried in county archives, and what I found there would make the HOA's entire claim collapse. Subscribe to Tomato. Tales so you don't miss the truth buried under 70 years of silt finally surfaces, and the fight turns federal. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with one dim lamp burning, the same spot where I'd been sorting through property files for weeks. The HOA might have had confidence, but I had something stronger. Curiosity mixed with a surveyor's instinct that never lets go of a question. I logged into the county archives, The digital ones most people never think to check. I'd learned long ago that power doesn't hide in board meetings. It hides in paperwork. After an hour of digging through brittle old scans, I found something odd. A 1947 Army Corps of Engineers permit. Grainy, but legible. It authorized dredging and culvert installation between Mill Pond and Sweetwater Creek. Mill Pond. That was my lake's original name. My pulse kicked up a notch. Sweetwater Creek fed directly into the Chattahoochee River, a federally navigable waterway. That meant one thing: federal jurisdiction. If that culvert still existed, even buried, this lake wasn't just a private pond. It was part of the waters of the United States, subject to the Clean Water Act and Army Corps oversight. Not the county, not the HOA. I leaned back, exhaling slow. I'd handled dozens of boundary disputes, but never one with stakes like this. I pulled up a 1947 topographic survey, tracing the faint dashed line that stretched eastward from the lake toward the creek. It was there, a concrete culvert buried under 70 years of sediment. I saved everything, like the permit, the map, and the Army Corps code, into a folder I named Federal Waterway Evidence. Then I printed hard copies. Not because I didn't trust my backups, but because evidence always looks stronger on paper. As I looked over the pages, the full picture clicked into place. The HOA had been collecting fees, issuing fines, and enforcing rules for 2 decades, all built on an assumption that was never true. They never had authority, not over me, not over the lake, not even over the water they'd been charging people to maintain. The silence in the room felt heavier than usual. I realized what this meant. Every dollar they'd collected under that lie was fraudulent. By midnight, I had a plan. Tomorrow I'd verify the connection myself. If that culvert was still functional, this fight wouldn't just be local anymore. It would be federal. The next morning, I pulled on chest waders and grabbed a steel probe, and what I found, buried beneath the mud, proved everything they'd denied. Subscribe to Tomato Tales so you don't miss the hidden culvert resurfaces and the HOA's authority sinks for good. The next morning, fog still hugged the shoreline like smoke clinging to the earth. I pulled on chest waders, grabbed my steel probe, and slung a small waterproof camera around my neck. If the 1947 permit was right, the culvert had to be buried somewhere along the lake's east edge, 50 yards from the main inlet. The HOA's no trespassing signs glared at me from across the water, nailed to trees they didn't even own. I ignored them. Knee-deep in cold water, I started pressing the probe into the muddy bottom, every few feet listening for that change in resistance, the solid thunk that says metal or concrete. It didn't take long. 4 feet down, I hit something dense. I pressed again, thud, not rock, not root. Something man-made. I marked the spot with a red survey flag, then took out my camera and started recording. The morning light bounced off the ripples, painting everything in silver and orange. June 12th, I said quietly into the mic. Probe hit at East Bank, coordinates logged. Possible culvert structure detected. The sound of my own voice steadied me. It made the discovery real. Back at the truck, I opened the GPS app and compared my coordinates with the 1947 Army Corps map. A perfect match. That culvert had survived 70 years of weather, growth, and silence. The HOA had built walking trails right over it, never realizing the pipe below their feet made this waterway federal property. For years, they'd treated this lake like a private swimming pool, collecting maintenance dues from homeowners who never questioned it. But if my evidence held up, every one of those fees was based on false jurisdiction. That wasn't just overreach. It was fraud, plain and simple. I drafted an email to the Army Corps of Engineers with attached coordinates, photos, and scans of the original permit. If they confirmed my findings, the HOA's authority here would vanish overnight. Before hitting send, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to warn Marjorie first, to give her one last chance to back off before she embarrassed herself. But then I remembered her voice. Get off our property. No, she'd made her choice. I hit send. By the next morning, the Army Corps had replied, and their message didn't just confirm my discovery. It opened a door the HOA never wanted me to walk through. Subscribe to Tomato Tales so you don't miss the federal confirmation turns this neighborhood feud into an official investigation. And the HOA starts. Panicking behind closed doors, the black SUV rolled to a stop just outside my gate at 9:06 a.m. 2 men and 1 woman stepped out, wearing field vests stamped with the Army Corps emblem. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that carried tension like static. Mr. Dalton? The lead investigator asked, extending a hand. I'm James Hanlon, Regulatory Branch. You've probably seen my name in the email. I have, I said, shaking his hand. Appreciate you coming this quickly. He gave a polite nod and looked toward the lake. Let's see what we've got. I guided them along the east bank, pointing out the flagged area where I'd hit the buried structure. The team spread out with instruments, metal detectors, ground-penetrating radar, and survey poles. Watching them work was like seeing truth made visible. Every sweep, every reading. A line of confirmation that this wasn't just my word anymore. 10 minutes in, one of the techs called out, "Got a hit." They ran the scanner again. The readout showed a dense linear object about 4 feet down, just where the old Army Corps map said it would be. Hanlon crouched by the flagged spot, pressing his palm against the wet soil. Concrete, he said quietly. Old reinforced. That's our culvert, he turned to me. You were right. I nodded, but inside my stomach tightened. I wasn't worried about being wrong. I was worried about what this discovery would trigger. Across the water, movement caught my eye. 3 HOA board members stood at the edge of the subdivision trail, whispering furiously. Marjorie was there too, sunglasses hiding her eyes. When she saw the government insignia on those vests, she froze. Hanlon noticed them and gave me a sidelong glance. They the ones who've been filing complaints? Non-stop, I said. He sighed. Typical. Every month, it's someone claiming jurisdiction they don't have. You'd be amazed how often it's about lakes and ponds. The techs took readings, photographs, and measurements. After nearly 2 hours, Hanlon packed up his folder and snapped it shut. Mr. Dalton, as of today, this property is under confirmed federal jurisdiction. I'll be issuing a notice to the local county clerk and HOA's council. They'll need to cease all enforcement actions immediately. It was the calmest way anyone had ever said you're finished in my presence. I thanked him, shook his hand again, and watched as the SUV disappeared down the road. Across the lake, Marjorie and her crew were still standing there, silent. By that afternoon, I received the official report in my inbox, PDF, signed and time-stamped. The HOA's power had just evaporated. But instead of backing down, they started digging for a new angle. 2 days later, I found a letter in my mailbox, a cease and desist, this time with my name spelled wrong, and an accusation that crossed a line even they shouldn't have dared. Subscribe to Tomato Tales so you don't miss the HOA retaliates with lies, lawyers, and a move that forces me to fight back publicly. 2 mornings after the inspection, I opened my mailbox to find a white envelope stamped, Certified Urgent. No return address. Just my name, misspelled as E. Dalton, like even the paper itself didn't take it seriously. Inside was a formal letter typed on Brookvale HOA letterhead, complete with the association's seal. The first line made me laugh. Quietly, the kind of laugh that comes out when anger burns too low to show. Mr. Dalton, you are hereby instructed to cease and desist from conducting unauthorized activities around the community lake, including but not limited to excavation, construction, or dissemination of misleading information regarding property ownership. Failure to comply will result in civil penalties. and further legal action. They'd actually written misleading. Formation. The same week the Army Corps of Engineers had confirmed everything I said was true. I scanned. The rest? Legal buzzwords, vague threats. A signature from their counsel, someone named R.P. Latham Esquire. I looked him up. Retired 5 years ago. The HOA had probably just recycled an old letter template to make it look official. Still, this wasn't about the letter. It was about fear. They were scrambling. I grabbed my phone and recorded a short video. Not for YouTube, not yet. Just documentation. June 15th, I said. Received cease and desist from Brookvale HOA, despite federal confirmation of property jurisdiction. Evidence retained. Then I walked back to the lake. The air felt different now. Charged, unsettled. Across the water, someone was watching from the trail. A tall man in a golf shirt, sunglasses, arms crossed. Not Marjorie this time. Someone knew. I raised my hand in a small wave. He didn't respond. Just turned and walked off. By evening, a neighbor named Clara stopped by, carrying a folded flyer. "They're passing these around," she said quietly. It was a printed notice with my name on it, or at least the wrong version again. It claimed I was disrupting community peace, that I'd called in federal agents under false pretenses, and that homeowners should report any suspicious activity near the lake. I stared at it for a moment. "They're trying to smear me," I said. Clara nodded. "Half the people don't believe it. The other half, they're scared of crossing Marjorie." That's when I knew this wasn't just about land anymore. This was about power and narrative, and they were losing both. I opened my laptop, pulled up the inspection report PDF, and hit record again. This time, for my channel. If they wanted a story, I'd give them one. But it would be the truth. That night I uploaded the first clip. Evidence, documents, and all. Within 24 hours it hit 100,000 views. And the HOA finally realized their lies were no longer confined to the neighborhood. Subscribe to Tomato Tales, so you don't miss Public Attention Turns the Tide. Lawyers get involved for real. And Marjorie makes a desperate move that backfires spectacularly. I didn't expect it to blow up overnight. When I hit upload, it was past midnight. Just a calm, factual breakdown. Timestamps, inspection footage, the federal confirmation email, and a scanned copy of the 1947 permit. No drama, no name-calling, just truth. By sunrise, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Notifications stacked faster than I could read them. Comments flooded in. People from all over the country sharing their own HOA horror stories. Finally, someone fought back. "Get him, Eli. Document everything." Even small channels started clipping pieces of it. The story wasn't just about a lake anymore. It was about a neighborhood's arrogance meeting federal law. And losing. By noon, the video had hit under 20,000 views. By nightfall, 500,000. Then came the email from a local news outlet. "We'd like to feature your story in a weekend segment." I hesitated, but then I thought about that cease and desist letter, and the false flyers with my name on them. If they wanted to play in public, I'd meet them there. The segment aired 3 days later. Local HOA accused of overreach. Homeowner proves lake is under federal jurisdiction. The footage showed me standing by the lake, pointing to the culvert marker while explaining the inspection. They blurred the HOA members' faces, but everyone in Brookvale knew who they were. Marjorie's response came fast. The next morning, she held a community meeting that looked more like damage control. Someone sent me a recording. She was standing in front of a crowd, red-faced, claiming I'd forged documents and manipulated the media. What she didn't know was that I'd already submitted the official inspection report to the county recorder's office. It was now public record. Anyone could pull it up. Within hours, homeowners began calling an emergency vote to dissolve the HOA board. They wanted answers. Bank statements, meeting minutes. Years of maintenance fees suddenly didn't look so voluntary anymore. That evening, Clara stopped by again. "They're panicking," she said. "I heard they hired an attorney out of Atlanta." "Good," I said, "because now they'll have to explain to him how they enforced federal property like it was theirs." The calm felt almost eerie after weeks of chaos. I sat by the lake, watching the reflection of porch lights ripple across the water, and realized something. I hadn't just defended my land. I'd exposed a system, but Marjorie wasn't finished. That night, I caught something on my security camera that made it clear. Losing power doesn't mean people stop fighting. Subscribe to Tomato Tales so you don't miss where the HOA's desperation crosses the line, and I finally catch them red-handed. The night after, the news segment aired. The lake was quieter than usual, too quiet. The frogs that usually croaked along the banks were silent, and the only sound was the soft hum of the wind against the reeds. I was in my kitchen reviewing emails when my phone buzzed. Motion detected on my perimeter camera. Timestamp, 11:42 p.m. At first, I thought it was an animal. Then I saw the footage. 2 figures, hooded, moving along the east bank with flashlights. They weren't exploring. They were digging. I paused the video and zoomed in. One of them was shorter, stocky build, wearing a reflective vest. The other moved stiffly, like someone trying too hard not to be recognized. And when she turned slightly toward the light, I saw her face. Marjorie. My chest tightened, not from fear, from anger. They were trying to bury the culvert, literally. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and started documenting the footage live. "June 18th, I said quietly. "Brookvale HOA members caught attempting to alter federally protected property, after jurisdiction confirmed." Then I called the sheriff's department. By the time a cruiser arrived, the 2 figures were gone, but the evidence wasn't. Fresh shovel marks cut into the mud right over the culvert line. A chunk of new plastic piping lay nearby, still wrapped in hardware store labeling. They hadn't even finished the job. The deputy, a calm man named Ramirez, took one look at my security footage and whistled. "Is that who I think it is?" "Yep," I said. He chuckled under his breath. "You realize this isn't just trespassing now, right? That's federal tampering. Corp won't like that one bit." "Good," I said. "Maybe it's time they learned what that feels like." I copied the footage to 2 USB drives and handed one to the deputy. The other I backed up to cloud storage just in case. By dawn, I had an email drafted to Jay Hanlon at the Army Corps, complete with video stills and coordinates. When I hit send, I felt the same mix of relief and tension as before, knowing that truth was on my side, but also that this was going to make things worse before it got better. Across the lake, Marjorie's house lights stayed off that morning, but her silence said more than words ever could. 2 days later, Hanlon called me personally, and what he told me meant this was no longer just a neighborhood dispute. It was a federal investigation. Subscribe to Tomato Tales so you don't miss the agent's return to the lake. Citations turn into charges, and Marjorie's entire empire starts to crumble under the weight of her own lies. 2 mornings later, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Dalton?" a voice said, low and steady. "This is James Hanlon with the Army Corps of Engineers. We received your latest video evidence." He didn't waste time. "We're opening a formal investigation into possible tampering with federal property under Title 33. I'll be forwarding this to our compliance unit and the county sheriff's office for joint action." I could almost hear papers shuffling on his desk. "Mr. Dalton," he added, "thank you for documenting everything. Most people don't realize how much that helps us. You did this by the book." When the call ended, I just sat there for a minute, letting the silence fill the room. I wasn't celebrating, not yet. In my experience, justice doesn't move fast. It just moves steady. By noon, 2 unmarked vehicles and 1 county cruiser were parked near the subdivision entrance. Federal agents in plain jackets walked the trail with clipboards and cameras, retracing the same path Marjorie had taken 2 nights earlier. Neighbors gathered on porches, whispering, pointing. The same people who'd once believed every word the HOA said were now watching them being questioned on their own sidewalks. I kept my distance, camera rolling from my driveway. This wasn't revenge. It was record-keeping. When Hanlon approached me that afternoon, he looked serious but calm. "We confirmed physical tampering," he said. "They disturbed part of the culvert cap and attempted to install unauthorized drainage." He flipped open his notepad. "That's a violation of Section 1344. Unlawful modification of a federally connected waterway. We'll be issuing a notice of violation to the HOA and referring it to the State Environmental Bureau." Across the lake, Marjorie stood frozen beside 2 agents. She looked smaller now, her confidence stripped away by the reality of jurisdictional law. Every word, every threat she'd thrown at me had come back like a boomerang. One of the homeowners, Clara, walked over from the trail. "They're saying Marjorie ordered it," she whispered. "Told the maintenance guys it was routine cleanup." I nodded slowly. Routine doesn't usually involve shovels at midnight. By evening, the HOA issued a temporary suspension of leadership notice, claiming Marjorie was taking personal time. Everyone knew what that meant. The board was collapsing from the inside. For the first time in months, the lake was quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels earned. But even as the investigation unfolded, I couldn't shake one question. What else were they hiding in those 20 years of records? When I found out, it changed everything I thought I knew about Brookvale. Subscribe to Tomato Tales so you don't miss hidden financial records surface. The HOA's corruption is exposed, and justice finally catches up with the ones who thought they were untouchable. The federal case might have ended the argument about the lake, but I still had one question burning in the back of my mind. What else had they done? See, HOAs don't just survive on dues. They thrive on control, and control leaves a paper trail. 3 weeks after the inspection, I received a public records request response from the county clerk's office. Documents the HOA had never meant for anyone to see. Scanned bank statements, meeting notes, and budget reports stretching back 15 years. At first glance, it all looked routine. Landscaping fees, maintenance budgets, community improvements. But line by line, the numbers started to tell a different story. Thousands labeled as lake upkeep, invoices from a maintenance company that didn't exist, withdrawals that led to a single checking account, one in Marjorie Sinclair's name. My stomach sank. It wasn't just misuse of power, it was theft. I organized the files chronologically, matching every transaction against known expenses. Over the years, she'd siphoned nearly $80,000 in maintenance fees, all under the guise of community projects that never happened. I didn't need to say anything. The numbers spoke for themselves. I packaged everything, the scans, timestamps, witness statements, into a single digital folder titled Brookvale, HOA Records, Evidence.zip, and forwarded it to Hanlon and the County Fraud Division. Within a week, the HOA was officially dissolved by member vote. Marjorie resigned under investigation. Her attorney tried to claim clerical misunderstanding, but with a paper trail that long, it was over before it began. The day they removed the Brookvale HOA sign from the subdivision entrance, I stood by the lake and watched the reflection of the crane on the water. It wasn't just the end of their rule. It was the start of something clean. Clara walked up beside me. "Feels different now," she said quietly. "Yeah," I replied. "It finally feels like mine. For the first time since I bought this place, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. No more board meetings. No more fines. No more false authority. Just quiet. Just peace. Just land. And maybe that's the real story here. Not about law or jurisdiction, but about standing your ground when you know you're right, even if the whole world says otherwise." But the strangest part? After everything, I got a letter in the mail. Not from Marjorie. Not from the county, but from a homeowner across the lake with a story that might just start this all over again. It had been 2 quiet months since the Brookvale HOA dissolved. No more letters, no meetings, no uniformed officers knocking at my gate. The air felt lighter, the kind of peace that almost makes you forget how heavy things used to be. Then, one morning in late August, I found an envelope tucked under my door. No return address, just my name, spelled correctly this time. Inside was a single sheet of paper, old, yellowed at the edges, folded 3 times. The handwriting was shaky. Deliberate, Mr. Dalton, you don't know me. But my grandfather was one of the original builders of the Brookvale Dam back in 1947. He always said there was something the Army Corps never documented. Something buried under that lake before they poured the concrete. He tried to report it once, but they told him to stay quiet. Said it wasn't his concern. If you start digging near the north bank under the old oak, you might find what he meant. Be careful who you tell. Some things were meant to stay buried. A neighbor I read it twice, then a 3rd time. The north bank, the same side where the culvert ran. The next evening I walked out there with a flashlight. The air smelled different, heavy, metallic, like rain before a storm. The moon cast long shadows across the water. I stopped by the oak. Its roots coiled deep into the bank like veins gripping the past. The ground felt soft beneath my boots, recently disturbed like someone had been there before me. That's when I saw it, half buried in the dirt, glinting faintly under the beam of my flashlight. A rusted metal tag, the kind used for equipment labeling. Stamped across it were the words "Property of U.S. Army. Do not remove," and below that, a number I didn't recognize. I brushed off the mud and slipped it into my pocket, the cold metal heavy against my palm. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about property anymore. Back at the house, I sat by the window, staring out over the lake. The water was calm, but it no longer looked the same. It felt deeper, like it was holding something I hadn't uncovered yet. I placed the tag on my desk beside the old survey maps and took a slow breath. Maybe the fight with the HOA was just the surface. Maybe this lake still had stories left to tell, ones buried long before any of us got here. And if that's true, then this isn't over, not even close. Subscribe to Tomato Tales, because next time we're not uncovering fraud. We're uncovering what they built this lake to hide.